All right, today we're going to cover section 10.2. Okay? Alexander, let me ask you, did you go on the website and see some of the lectures? Were you able to pick up everything from the website?
Yeah, I'm sure you heard my voice on there.
All right, now this has to do with graphing parabolas. Okay, like we have been. But it's going to be a little bit different because we're going to take those parabolas and we're going to transform them. Sometimes they'll be narrower, sometimes they'll be upside down. Sometimes now, instead of moving them up or down, we may move them up or down, but we'll move them side to side as well. Okay? Here is a general form, okay, standard form for a quadratic, which is a parabola. Right? Because what we've been working with here is quadratic functions. Anything to the second power, quadratic functions. Okay? And the general form is ax squared. Now, I want you to tell me before I finish up that general form here, if a is a big number, what happens to the parabola? It gets narrower. What happens if that's a fraction? It's wider. What happens if it's a negative? Flips it upside down, right? It opens down. Okay. It's a reflection, right? Now forget that middle one. What happens with C? If C is positive, what happens to that parabola? What happens to it? Forgetting the like if I had something like this, y equals x squared plus 7. Yeah, so that last number there determines if it goes up or down, you know, if it rises up so many units or goes down so many units, right? If it's a negative, it goes down, and that's what C is all about. And you're going to find as we go through this chapter that the B, the middle term, determines side to side. Okay? So we won't be concerned too much with that right now. And that is a general form. So, if I had an equation like y equals, let's say 2x squared, parabola going to be wide or narrow? Narrower because of 2. And let's say plus, let's say 6x minus 3. What about the minus 3? What does that do to it? It's going to be 3 units down. All right.
So that middle term doesn't have anything to do with it?
The middle term will move it side to side, but that's not what we're going to be concerned about. What we want to do, and the directions will say, find. We're going to find two things here. First of all, we're going to find the axis of symmetry. Okay, does anybody know what the axis of symmetry means? What does it mean? What does it mean? What is the axis of symmetry? What do you think, Nick? Nick, what do you think it is?
Probably the line of symmetry.
The axis of symmetry is the line that cuts that parabola in half. Okay, it's an imaginary line that cuts our line in half. Yeah.
Isn't that like the maximum?
No, the maximum and minimum come from the vertex. Okay? So let's find the axis of symmetry. And the way we find the axis of symmetry In order to find the axis of symmetry, we know this is a parabola. We know it's going to open upwards because of the positive 2. We know it's going to be down 3 units. But to find that line where it cuts that parabola right in half, it is x is equal to the opposite of whatever the b is over 2 times a. Okay? So we're looking for the axis of symmetry. Let's identify that the a is 2. The b is 6. And the c is -3. That's what the a, b, and c are. And in order to find the equation of the axis of symmetry, the opposite of b, which is -6, because we want the opposite of a positive 6, which is -6, over 2 times a. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? That means, and if I reduce that, -3/2. Yes.
So you just times the A together? Like,
A times 2.
oh, A times
2a. Okay?
So then
Here's what this means. The axis of symmetry, remember what I said, it was an imaginary line. And that imaginary line is at -3/2. Here's -1, here's -2. -1.5 is right here, isn't it? What happens when x is equal to that? What type of line do we have? X equals -3/2. What kind of a line? When x equals a number, it is a vertical line. Here's the imaginary line that cuts that parabola right in half at -3/2. Okay? So I know that the parabola is going to go right around that line. And I know it's going to be a little narrower. Okay? Now what we're going to do is find the vertex. And how do you find the vertex? This, -3/2, is called the axis of symmetry. It's the equation of the axis of symmetry. Yes?
Would we put, if a question was asking us to solve for the axis of symmetry, would we put -3/2, or would we put the 1?
If you wanted the equation of the axis of symmetry, it's x equals -3/2. You could put -1.5 if you wanted to. It's the same answer.
What did you do with the B or whatever?
With the what?
With the B or whatever, with the opposite, what did you say it was?
The opposite of the b, the opposite of 6,
Okay.
over 2 times a.
So you just change it.
And that's the axis of symmetry, right? You just change it.
So if it's a negative, it becomes a positive.
It becomes a positive. I'll do a couple problems. Let's find the vertex. And here's how we find the vertex. To find the vertex, we're going to take the x-coordinate, the -3/2. We're going to put it in for x in my equation, and we're going to see what the y value is. So it's going to look like this. Here's my equation. Y equals 2x squared plus 6x minus 3. Okay? And then we're going to do this. In order to find the y, we're going to put in -3/2 for x. Okay? Here. And here. That will tell me the y-coordinate of the vertex. Now watch. We'll go to our calculator. And we'll hit 2 parentheses, negative 3 divided by 2, or you can put 1.5, negative 1.5, squared, plus 6 parentheses, negative 3 divided by 2, and then minus 3.
What about X?
You see what we did?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Negative 7.5. Or negative 7.5. That's your vertex. Look at my drawing where you see the equation of the axis of symmetry. Notice it's a dotted line, because that's an imaginary line that cuts a parabola in half. And my vertex is at negative 3/2, which is right there. And negative 7.5, which is right here. That's the vertex. Can you tell me if this parabola opens up or down? It opens up. And we know it's a little bit narrower. And we can sketch the graph. That's what that graph is going to look like. And you can put it in your calculator to see. Right? I'm going to do a couple of these problems for you. Can you tell me now, is the vertex, is that going to be a maximum value or a minimum value? Minimum. It's the lowest value, right? And so we say that this is a minimum value.
Why is that minimum?
Because it's the lowest point. Minimum means the lowest. It's the lowest point.
If it was upside down, it'd be the maximum.
If it were upside down, it'd be a maximum. Okay? Let's do another problem. Basically, this is what your section is all about here, this section 10.2. Okay? And let's take another couple of examples here so we can kind of get an idea. I'll do one that opens upwards, and then I'll do one that opens down. So let's take y equals 3x squared minus 6x plus 2. All right. Is my parabola going to open up or down? It's going to open up because we have a positive 3, right? Okay. To find the equation of the axis of symmetry, that dotted line. In order to find it, it is the opposite of the b term over 2 times a. And what is the opposite of negative 6? Because that's my b term, right? So the opposite of that is a positive 6 over 2 times a. What's a? 3. And 6 over 6 is 1. So I can say the equation of the axis of symmetry is x equals 1. That means that x equals 1, this is the imaginary line that cuts that parabola right in half. It's called the axis of symmetry. It cuts it right in half. So my parabola is going to go right around that. And like we said, it's going to open up, isn't it? Right? Okay. How do we find the vertex? I mean, is this parabola way up here? Is it down here? We have to find out what the vertex is. How do you find the y coordinate? Plug in 1 in place of x. So it's going to be to find the y-coordinate, 3 times 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 2. Okay, so far? 1 squared is 1. You can put this in your calculator if you want. 1 squared is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Minus 6 times 1 plus 2. And 3 minus 6 is negative 3, plus 2 is negative 1. My vertex now is at 1 and negative 1. That's my vertex. My vertex is at 1 and negative 1. Right there is the vertex at 1 and negative 1. That's my vertex. Okay? The equation of the axis of symmetry, x equals 1. Is this parabola going to be narrow or wider than normal? Narrower. So it's going to come down like this, and we can sketch it.
Wait, why? I don't get how
Because
you
there's a 3 in front of the x.
How, you don't get how
Are
wide?
you like sketch? Like, shouldn't it be on that line of symmetry? Oh, between line of symmetry.
Right, that line of symmetry cuts it right in half, and the 3 makes that narrower than the regular parabola. Okay? And it's just a sketch. But at least I know where the vertex is, and I know where the equation of the axis of symmetry is. So we can kind of sketch it. Now, is the vertex 1 and negative 1? Is that a maximum value or a minimum value? Minimum. It's minimum, right? So we say this is a minimum value.
Because the parabola is
Correct. Because the parabola opens up, and this is the smallest value in that parabola. So we say that that's a minimum value. I'm going to do one more example for you. And I want to do a parabola that might open downwards. For instance, you know, sometimes we use y equals, and sometimes we use f of x equals, but we know that that's all the same, right? So let's take negative 3x squared minus 12x plus 10. All right? What I want to know, first of all, I want the equation of the axis of symmetry. Is this parabola going to open up or down? Open down. At the vertex, are we going to have a maximum or a minimum? Maximum. It'll be right on top, right? All right. So the axis of symmetry. It's the opposite of the B over 2A. The B term is what? 12, right? Is it positive 12 or negative?
It's a positive.
It's a positive. I want the opposite of a negative 12, which is a positive 12, over 2 times A, which is negative 3. And so I have 12 over negative 6, which is negative 2. So the equation of the axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. It's that imaginary line that cuts a parabola in half. And we know it's going to open upside down. And how do I find the vertex? Negative 2. Well, now what we need to do is find the y value. So negative 3, I'm going to put in the negative 2 for x, minus 12 times negative 2 plus 10. Look, if you're going to put this in your calculator, the way I have it written on the board is the way you should put it into your calculator. Don't take any shortcuts. There aren't any. And it's easier to use parentheses than anything else. So we want to put -3 parenthesis, -2, close your parenthesis and then square it. I'm going to put it in just like I have it written on the board. -12 parentheses, -2, close your parenthesis, plus 10. Okay, you can't go wrong if you put that into your calculator the way that it's written. And we're going to get 22. And so my vertex is at -2 and 22. I know it's going to be fairly narrow. -2 and 22 is somewhere up in here. And we know that it's going to open down, correct? So we'll sketch it, and it looks like that. Is this a maximum value? I think we determined that was going to be a maximum value, didn't it? So what is the maximum value? The maximum value is at -2 and 22. Okay? Now I know this lesson was a little bit long. I'm only going to give you a few problems to do. So homework. So what I'm going to ask you to do, because we only have a few minutes left, is on page 638. I want you to do problems 3, 5, 16, and 21. I want you to do those 4 problems. And I will pass out draft paper to you guys before you leave.